All right, everyone, welcome back to Anton's class. If you're new here, my name's Anton, and I'm all about helping people discover more freedom through travel and life abroad. If that's something that interests you, I would love to have you back. Today's video is going to be a little bit different, but it's still on topic, all right, because it has to do with a group of African Americans who do not believe that we are from Africa. They believe that we are indigenous to the Americas, all right? And they try to encourage people like me and my classmates that we should give up our search in Africa, that our heritage is not from Africa, that our ancestry is not from Africa, but that instead we are indigenous to the Americas. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into this topic because it is a very important topic and it's one that has been sort of circulating within the Black community, within the diaspora. So let's get into it. Chapter 1, we're going to go ahead and talk about genetics. Okay, so naturally, as African Americans, if we get a DNA test, guess what? It shows that we genetically test to Africa, particularly West Africa. We have ancestors who are Yoruba, Igbo, Hausa, Fulani, Ashanti, Wolof, Mande, and many other West African tribes, as well as some Bantu peoples in Central Africa. That is of no surprise, right? However, these Aboriginal Americans will tend to play down genetic testing and say that they don't believe in the genetic tests. They posit that there is some conspiracy by the government to cover up the fact that we are Aboriginal to the Americas. Now, unfortunately, you guys, that's just not true, right? The genes don't lie. Not these genes. These genes, they don't lie. And that's the reality, right? So to demystify DNA tests, all you do is you spit into a tube, you ship it in. You don't tell them anything about your origins, all right? They have no idea where you're from until they get your DNA and they look at the genetic code and they see with which people you match, all right? So I got my DNA test. If you haven't seen that already, it's a pretty interesting video. You can go ahead and check it out. The link will be in the description. And of course, my African ancestry came from West Africa, and I am an African American. It did not show that I was some other elusive indigenous group that was here in the Americas. It showed that I was of African descent. Now, one claim that these Aboriginal Americans make is that we descend as Black Americans not from Africans, but from a group of people who were related to Australian Aboriginal peoples as well as Melanesians. Now, Melanesians are Black people who are native to the South Pacific. We do have some similarities phenotypically, meaning in our facial features and our hair textures. However, I want you guys to know that those two groups of people are very genetically distant and distinct from Africans. All right? Those people are more closely related to Polynesians as well as to Filipinos and other Southeast Asians. They're more closely related to Tibetans and even Japanese than they are to Africans, even though they phenotypically resemble Africans to some extent. So, again, when African Americans get genetically tested, we do not share common ancestry with Melanesians or Australian Aborigines. We share common ancestry with West Africans. Now, of course, everyone's related. So if you go back far enough, we all share common ancestry. So please understand that. Yes, all human beings, everyone watching this, we are all one big family. But in this context, I mean of recent genetic ancestry. African Americans are of recent West African ancestry. We're very distantly related to Melanesians and Australian Aboriginal peoples. So keep that in mind. So again, the genes don't lie. Let me take a quick sip. So chapter 2 is going to be about culture, all right? The African American culture is very rich, it's diverse, it's beautiful. And guess what? A lot of our traditions have origins in West Africa. Our cooking traditions. Did you know that rice was indigenously cultivated in West Africa? That's right. Our ancestors cultivated a wild species of rice and domesticated it in West Africa, and it is completely indigenous to Africa and has not been introduced from outside of the continent. Our ancestors also domesticated a variety of other species because West Africa was a homeland. It is a place of origin of agriculture on this planet. So it is no surprise that our African ancestors, when they were forcefully removed from their home in Africa and brought and enslaved in the Americas, that they grew rice, specifically in the Carolinas, all right? And the enslavers were well aware of our genius and our ability to cultivate rice. And that is why we grew rice in the Carolinas. All right. A lot of the southern dishes of America have African origins, including the rice dishes. Mashed potatoes is sort of similar to fufu or banku or some of the swallows that they eat in West Africa, as well as throughout all of Africa, really. So that is one of the cultural relics that we've maintained. Also think about the music. There are certain traditional African American music styles that definitely have origins in West Africa. We have call and response and antiphony in certain forms that we see even in gospel music that clearly have their origins in West Africa. Okay? They have no relation to some other groups that claim to be indigenous to Americas. They're clearly a West African in origin. Let's also talk about language, all right? Our ancestors were known to have been speaking Yoruba, Igbo, Fulani. In the Caribbean specifically, there are some dialects, like I believe the Bajan dialect of Barbados, which is where Rihanna's from, where they have some African words. I believe they have some Fulani words. They have some Tree or Ashanti words in their language as well. Same goes for other Caribbean islands like Jamaica. We were speaking those languages here in the United States as well, but they forcefully separated families so that way we couldn't communicate with each other. Also the religion. Our ancestors were known to be practitioners of voodoo or voodoo. That is clearly West African in origin. All right, I don't need to spend too much time on that. We all know the origins of that, and it is West African. There's no getting around it. We also know that a lot of our ancestors were practicing Islam. Did you know that about a third, I believe, of the Africans who were captured and enslaved and brought to the Americas were originally practicing Islam? Because Islam had established itself in Mali and certain parts of Senegal. So our ancestors who were brought from those regions were practicing Muslims, okay? And that was documented and it has been established, all right? So that, of course, again, is another solid proof that we were from Africa, not from the Americas, okay? So, Chapter 3, Historical Records. We have historical records demonstrating the fact that our ancestors came from Africa. Unfortunately, the horrific truth of the matter is that we were purchased as merchandise. And whenever there are transactions, there are going to be documents, there are going to be records. And we have clear records that show which regions in Africa we were even brought from. All right. Those castles and dungeons and slave quarters are still in existence today in Ghana. I believe it's called in Cape Coast Castle. They're off the coast of Senegal and other regions as well. Okay. We know for a fact that our ancestors were unfortunately purchased as merchandise, right? We were human beings living, creating, loving, and existing and thriving really in Africa before we were purchased. And that is recorded, okay? That is recorded history. So that is yet another proof that we were in Africa, okay? This video is going to be short. This is the last chapter. Chapter 4 is the conclusion. So in conclusion, I just wanted to invite you guys because I think the origin of these people who claim to be anything but African stems from internalized anti-blackness. It stems from internalized racism, okay? We have been told and sold a story forever that we were less than. So unfortunately, a lot of our people came up with these stories to help us cope. They're coping mechanisms. If you could convince yourself and those around you that you were not from Africa, because Africa's the dark continent, that you were something else, something different, something special, indigenous to America, that made people have, I don't know, it was a coping mechanism, as I said. So unfortunately, this coping mechanism has persisted for so long, and it has evolved into different things. But the fact remains, you guys, we are from Africa, and I wanted to approach this topic from a place of love and understanding and compassion, not a place of condemnation and judgment, because I'm not here to judge or condemn the people who claim that they are not from Africa. I'm just here because it does pain me and it hurts my heart when I see my people falling into these self-hating, anti-black traps. All right? We have a very dignified history in Africa. Beautiful, rich cultures that we come from. The Hausa kingdoms, the Fulani kingdoms, the Kingdom of Mali, the Empire of Mali, the empires of Senegal, the rich history, the rich culture, the rich languages, the rich food traditions. Our ancestors were sometimes kings and queens, but generally they were merchants and farmers, mothers, fathers, traders, weavers, seamstresses, horseback riders, warriors, metallurgists, creating different forms of metal, artists, artisans, griots, musicians. Our ancestors were architects and all manner of things. We were human, fully and beautifully human. We have a very rich culture and history to be proud of in Africa. So I would love to invite the Aboriginal American crowd to reconsider the evidence and the beauty of Africa, to come back home to Africa, all right, to explore Africa. So you guys, that's about it. By the way, this is from Mali. I bought this when I was in South Africa from a woman from Mali at the Rosebank Sunday Market. So anyways, you guys, thank you so much for stopping by Anton's class. And if this video was interesting to you at all, please give it a like. Please engage in the comments below and be respectful. All right. I know this is a potentially controversial topic, but I would love to have you engage in the comments below. I'm so happy you decided to stop by. Please hit that subscribe button and I'll see you back next time.